Welcome back. Now to the breaking news out of France. Reports of a massive hack against the frontrunner. The New York Times describes it tonight this way. On the eve of the most consequential French election in decades, the staff of the presidential candidate Emmanuel Macron said on Friday evening that the campaign had been targeted by a massive and coordinated hacking operation, one with the potential to destabilize the nation's democracy before voters go to the polls on Sunday. Jeremy Bash is still with us, but let's get the latest from Philip Crowther, White House correspondent for France 24. Philip, can you tell us what you know about what has been released to the internet?
Very difficult to say, you know, because there are so many documents and there simply hasn't been enough time to look at all of them. Plus, add to that the campaign that was targeted by this hack in the first place, the campaign of Emmanuel Macron, is saying that there were some original documents in this hack, but that there were false documents added to it and then distributed. So it's pretty much impossible for us right now to verify what is actually real in here and what is not. At first view, looks like these documents are rather innocuous, nothing all too scandalous in there. And add to that the timing that seems to be very important because it's so close to election day. But this is actually happening during a media blackout of the French election, meaning that there is actually in France itself zero coverage of this very important hack, it seems. Seems strange, doesn't it? But during these 48 last hours of the French election, because people are already voting right now in overseas territories, there is actually no media talk about this. In other words, whoever hacked these emails, or rather released them at this precise time, might have got it completely wrong.
Philip, explain the extent of that ban to me. So the media, people like us, can't talk about it on TV, but can French voters access this information on the internet, or are there laws that govern internet content as well in France?
Well, the Interior Ministry actually has come out to say that people should not be distributing these documents and should not be publishing them on social media, for example. What you're seeing right now during this blackout is essentially this. I listened to the latest radio broadcast at the top of the hour and watched the latest TV broadcasts also at the top of the hour. All they are allowed to say at this moment is there is an election underway in France, and that is pretty much it. You cannot talk about the candidates, you're not supposed to talk about their campaigns, and the candidates themselves are also not supposed to talk about the election. Now, what happened tonight in France is this. The Emmanuel Macron campaign just about managed to release this statement a few minutes before the start of the blackout. They were able to say, look, we were hacked, these emails are out there, and they are actually, most of them are true. There are some false ones thrown in there with them. This didn't give the campaign of his opponent, Marine Le Pen of the National Front, enough time to respond. She is not allowed to talk to the media during these last 48 hours during the French election. This is all we will hear about this hack in the French media, meaning that voters, yes, of course, they can go on several websites where these emails seem to be available. Again, we don't know which ones are actually true and which ones are false, and they can talk about it on social media, but that is pretty much the extent of it.
Jeremy Bash, we have a New York Times report from April 24th that talked about researchers at a cybersecurity firm called Trend Micro, who claimed that on March 15th they spotted a hacking group that they believed to be a Russian intelligence unit turning their weapons on the campaign of Mr. Macron. Is this, to you, a sign of Russian meddling in the French election?
It sure seems like deja vu, Nicole. Deja vu, by the way, is French for deja
Even
vu.
I know that.
Right. It really has echoes of what we saw in our own election, where Russian intelligence officials went into the emails of the front runner, someone who they did not prefer, to try to embarrass that person and hopefully give a boost to that person's opponent. I do think it's important to note a couple of similarities. One is the website where this information was disclosed was EM Leaks, and one of the websites that was used during our election was D.C. leaks, sort of about Washington or political leaks. That's number one. It's sort of a seemingly innocuous local website, even though, of course, it was a Russian intelligence front. And second, it was just simply the disclosure of internal information to try to embarrass them so that there could be kind of crowdsourcing of what's the embarrassing information. Now, as was pointed out, it's unclear whether these people did this in any competent way because we are up against the blackout deadline. But this is very familiar, and it is a classic tactic of Russian intelligence.
So James Comey testified this week that Russia is the greatest threat, the greatest adversary to the world. Why are they getting better at this instead of worse if it's out in the open that this is what they do to meddle with elections in the West?
Well, I think this is a really important point, Nicole, which is that we have not made Russia pay any price for this. And part of it is that our government is still somewhat in denial about what Russia did during our election. And this is to go to our previous point about the intelligence assessments and the warnings from our national security professionals that have been ignored by the senior-most levels of our government. And your previous guest on the previous panel said, you know, this is going to be a bad political story for the White House. I don't care if it's a bad political story for the White House. This is a bad story for America. If we deny Russia's activities and their capabilities, it will undermine our own security and the security of our allies around the world.
Philip, I can't let you go without you giving me an election prediction. I've been told that French pollsters are better than American pollsters, which isn't a very high bar with all deference to American pollsters. But do you think this affects the outcome, and any predictions about the outcome?
It shouldn't really. And by the way, polls are also not allowed during these last 48 hours, meaning that what we're playing with here is what came out just a few hours ago, essentially. Now, what we saw in the first round 2 weeks ago were incredibly accurate polls in France. Not many people expected that. They don't have the best history either, but they pretty much exactly predicted what was going to happen in the first round, meaning that we were going to head to this runoff between Marine Le Pen and Emmanuel Macron. And so what the latest polls are showing us that Emmanuel Macron is supposed to, according to those polls, get just over 60% of the vote, meaning that 39 or so percent, 38% would be left for Marine Le Pen. Now, of course, there can be some last-minute changes and maybe some hidden Marine Le Pen supporters who will come out and might not have admitted they were going to vote for her. Those are things that we, of course, have seen before. We saw that here in the United States with the election of Donald Trump. We saw that also with the Brexit vote in the United Kingdom. But the track record of the polls in France, at least for this election, is very, very good, and it indicates a pretty clear victory for Emmanuel Macron, but not an emphatic one. 60-40 is actually not seen as an emphatic victory, because let me just take you back to the time when Jean-Marie Le Pen, the father of Marine Le Pen, was in the runoff against Jacques Chirac. That was in 2002, and Jean-Marie Le Pen, the father of the current National Front candidate, got only 15% of the vote. She is set to get around 40%. So this is a political party, a far-right political party, that is doing better and better.